So I will call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022. Please join me for a flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Lincoln. Sarah, roll call please.
Mayor Eisenbeis.
Present.
Mr. Moser.
Here.
Ms. Duncan. Here. Mr. Yestad.
Here.
Mr. Christensen.
Here.
Ms. Tamshute. Here. And Mr. Peck.
Here. Is there any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? I see none. That'll bring us to ceremonial matters. Tonight we have a proclamation honoring Mike Motti. A proclamation honoring Mike Motti. Whereas Mike Motti served honorably in the United States Marine Corps from August of 1966 to August of 1968, and the Marine Corps Reserves until 1972, and whereas Mike worked for the Alyeska Ski Patrol, providing aid and assistance to people on the slopes for 6 years, earning the Outstanding Ski Patroller title twice. And whereas Mike moved to Sitka in 1980 to work for the United States Forest Service as the Chatham Area Helicopter Specialist and Area Safety Technician. And whereas Mike joined the Sitka Fire Department in 1983 and served in many capacities in both EMS and SAR divisions. Mike was an EMT 3, EMS lieutenant, EMT instructor, SAR member, search and rescue instructor, canine handler, incident management team lieutenant, and more. The thousands of hours of training and response that Mike accumulated in his service to Sitka cannot be calculated. And whereas Mike worked for Search from 1986 until his retirement in 2012 as the Search EMS coordinator, instructor, and was instrumental in developing the Search Medevac program that flew sick and injured patients from the villages around Southeast Alaska to Sitka and Anchorage. And whereas Mike held membership in many professional organizations, including National Search and Rescue Association, Mountain Rescue Association, Alaska Incident Management Team, Southeast Region EMS, and Wilderness Medical Associates, and whereas Mike held many professional certifications, most of which were attained through his volunteer service and his desire to help his fellow man. Mike knew that every certification he earned made him more of an asset to the SAR team and helped with the management of the mission. And whereas Mike was an avid outdoorsman that could be found on many of Sitka's trails almost daily, and it was doing what he loved until his very last day. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Assembly of the City and Borough of Sitka joins all Sitkans in extending our condolences to Susan Royce, her adult children Karen and Daryl, and their families, and in expressing our profound appreciation for Michael Motti's service to his community. In his long life, Mike always led by example and kept a keen sense of service to his family, community, and his fellow man. On behalf of the mayor, thank you, Susan. We do appreciate Mike's many hours of service that he gave to the city. I think he will be remembered for quite some time as a man who gave up his personal life so that he could help others and make the town a better place. I think that's something that we all strive to do from our seats here. So we thank you.
If I can, I'd like to speak about Mike a little bit. Mike was one of the instructors from my very first EMT class. He was my boss for a number of years when I flew for Search Medevac as a medic. He was a board member at Southeast Region EMS where I work. And he and I can't tell you how much time we spent down at the fire hall together and things. And if I devastated by the news of what happened, but at the same time, I very much appreciate the time that I got to spend with Mike. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about, this spring Conehead will be coming back because of Mike. Not sure who's going to put the roads on, but Mike made our symposiums better every time he was there, and as running Conehead, and I know I'm going to personally miss him, and we miss him all throughout Southeast Alaska. We've received a lot of feedback from EMS and SAR units all throughout Southeast Alaska, and he will be remembered this coming at the next symposium quite a bit. And so, thank you, Susan, for letting us share that time with you here. So.
All right, that'll bring us on to special reports this evening. We have two scheduled special reports tonight, starting with Woody Woodmark, Chair of the Sitka Tribe of Alaska.
Mr. Mayor and Assembly members, my report tonight is pretty brief. Our last meeting was like only 30 minutes, so that was a record. And our first special council meeting, usually the first Wednesday of the month, we didn't have a quorum. A couple things wanted to share. The council approved its next year's 2023 financial budget. A lot of hard work by the staff. The finance committee went through this to get where we're at for next year. We had a couple, we ratified a couple phone polls over the past month. Approved a donation request for the Alaska Native Brother, Alaska Native Sister holiday dinners. Certified its recent election by the tribe. Wanted to congratulate Lynn Belfast, Dion Brady Howard, and Louise Brady for getting back on their seats, and yours truly was reelected as chair. Lillian, and we have one more that is pending on background checks. And I wanted to take this moment to thank Mr. Robert Sam and Mr. Mike Miller for their service on the tribal council and dedication to the tribal citizens. And last but not least, I wanted to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody here. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate your report. Makes my reports at the end of the meeting awfully easy. Then we do have another scheduled special report from the Police and Fire Commission. The Chair, Greg Olson, and Commissioner Lloyd Platson are here to present. And for the Assembly's benefit, the memo is attached in your packet there.
So,
Good evening, gentlemen.
good evening. For the record, my name is Greg Olson. I'm the chair of the commission.
Lloyd Platson.
So the memo was in, we turned that over. I think you should have gotten with it, or what was intended was the transmittal memo that we received with the directions that we were sent on with this, and also some copies of some ordinances that were reviewed. I don't know how you want us to proceed. It's pretty straightforward. It's 3 pages. I don't know if you have specific questions or if you want me to go through what's in those 3 pages briefly.
Yeah, a summary of your findings and recommendations would be great.
So basically, we met on the issue 4 times. The first meeting was to figure out what it is we needed to do. The second meeting, we looked over some ordinances, and this came to us, it appeared kind of in 2 parts. Initially, the concern was snow on the sidewalks in the community, and when it came in front of the assembly, it got combined with general snow removal. We looked at the snow removal ordinance that the borough has. Basically, it's if people don't remove snow from the sidewalks, it's not a ticket. The city, either through under the ordinance, either through the Public Works or through the police department, they can have somebody shovel that snow. The city sends a bill to the person, or the borough sends a bill to the person, and they can put a lien on their property. There's a caveat in the ordinance that says that if a government entity put that snow on the sidewalks, they can't be billed for it. We had a meeting and we invited the snow removal Public Works Director, or person from Public Works, and from the state who are responsible for snow removal and plowing. We learned that there wasn't a lot of snow removal done, it was plowing, and that neither the borough or the state indicated that while they try not to put snow on the sidewalks, they don't go back and check, and if it gets on there, they don't take it off because they've got too much to do. The state is responsible for Sawmill Creek Road, HPR, and then the drag down through across the bridge. They try to hit in the snow times, they try to hit the main roads for buses, and then they got to get over to the airport and plow the runway. That's their primary concern. And the city does their plowing and moves the snow and gets on with other business, basically. Not giving them short shift there, but they don't spend, they don't have a lot of time spent on it. They do what they can do. That was my sense. We had a third meeting where Mike Finn with the all-terrain, Sitka all-terrain riders came, indicated, as was during their formation and changing of the ordinance, that they wanted to get involved with snow removal. So we looked at all this, and we had a series of 6 comments, really, opinions and conclusions, what we call them. The first question was, we believe that the code does adequately address snow removal, and both on the streets and the sidewalks. There's an enforcement issue in how to enforce it for the sidewalks and whether it can even be enforced. The day-to-day snow removal for both the state, the state does its own thing. We don't have a lot of say over that. As for the city, the ordinance doesn't micromanage how the city plows snow. That's left to the Public Works Director. One option was coordination of volunteers to shovel and remove snow from the sidewalks. That may be through the ATV group. It raises some potential issues which are better left to the city attorney about whether, if you have volunteers working on specific tasks for the city, whether that creates liability if something happens to them, to other people, or to property. That wasn't our issue, but it's a potential concern. Another option was to use temporary city employees, get hired in the winter to go shovel snow under the direction of the Office of Public Works. Again, that would necessitate additional funds. One of the recommendations was to look at how the snow is plowed, and rather than plowing it on each side, that it be plowed to the center and then to a non-sidewalk side of the road, like here on Lincoln Street. If you ran the grader blade at an angle, up into the median that doesn't have a sidewalk. Again, that's really for the public works to decide. There was talk about removing snow rather than just plowing it, and how if you get the snow out of there, that may be beneficial. I think that the city public works director said that they were looking into that, I believe, for places where they can move the snow to. And I guess the other thing that's, I mean, it's obvious to everybody who's been here for more than a few years, but not every winter is a guaranteed snow winter. I mean, if you live in Bethel or Anchorage or Fairbanks, you're going to get snow. I mean, it's a given. In Sitka, it's not always a given. I remember some winters where there was no snow. There was green grass growing in my yard in January. Or when it does snow, it snows for a couple days and it's, irritating and then it goes away. And then there's other winters where it's here all winter. But predicting that, I don't know that anybody has a Ouija board to predict if it's going to be a snow year or not. And that leads to the assembly having a discussion potentially about if there's additional funding for better equipment or different equipment, and whether that's priority for the use of money if it's not an every year thing. And I'll turn it over to Lloyd, may have some comments.
I think for me, it just the only way to really deal with snow would be to actually remove it from the streets versus plowing it. And again, that's the additional cost in terms of equipment, person power, all those things. So that would be a consideration for that. And the other part, I added in there kind of from a philosophical point, what is the purpose of the ordinance to begin with? What goal or what outcome do they want? And my assumption was that it was to make safe streets and safe sidewalks for people to navigate on. And if that's the case, then there's some other decisions that would be made, such as actual removal so it doesn't build up on sidewalks versus plowing. So I think that's the challenge that assembly members have in terms of deciding how to go about that. What is the underlying purpose of it? Because it is hard to enforce, because you never know if a person shovels and then the city comes through and plows it back up. It's unenforceable the way that it exists right now. So that'd be the only two additional comments that I would have. Probably not helpful, but
I guess I would note one other thing, just so the assembly's aware of it. We had these 4 meetings, they were on the agenda each time, with the exception of Mr. Finn, who came in to talk about the ATV removal, and the 2 state and city public works directors that we invited in. I don't think, other than the assembly or the commission members, we didn't have any citizens coming in to talk about it that I can recall. We didn't hear of anybody falling down and breaking anything, although that happens every year. We did have a variety of views on it could have been just, grabbing people off the street and putting them in our seats, and we had different views on the snow removal issues, some of the frustrations driving, whether, some other places, other states, they actually have the equipment to take the snow away. And myself, I've been kicking around the state since 1969, and my view is it goes with the territory. I live in Alaska, it snows in Alaska, and so I've got to deal with it. But we didn't have anybody come in and say, oh, I know so-and-so broke their hip and fell on this sidewalk because it wasn't snow. It may have happened, but nobody came in. Nobody came in to complain about the roads either. But that could have had something to do with the fact that the meetings were in April, May, June, and July, and there was no snow. I mean, it's forefront of people's minds when you're walking through it to get to your meeting. But just so you're aware of what input we had.
I would share one anecdotal
experience that I had in terms of it, walking down McGraw Street and coming across an elderly woman with a hand cart, you know, something to help her navigate. She was stuck out there in a rut, and she was quite old, and I don't know what she would have done if I had not come along and helped her. She was on her way to the mailbox, but she got stuck in a rut with her walker and couldn't move. She was just standing there, and it was cold. And so, although we may not have gotten a lot of feedback because of the time of year that we dealt with it, I think that's one thing that stuck in my mind is that to consider the impact that it does have on people navigating. So that would be my last comment.
Well, great. As it's becoming more seasonal and people have comments, we know where to send them to the experts now. No, I do thank you for your research into this, and especially the timeliness of the report coming out right now, as we are in the colder, darker months, and this is a consideration for the assembly moving forward, and additionally so with budgetary season coming forward. So.
On it, and I got an electric wheelchair. And last winter, getting from the sidewalk across the streets, of course, where the problem was, they come and plow the entrance, the sloped entrance on all the sidewalks, and the wheelchair won't go over the top of it. And it was really, quite a bit of inconvenience to have to get off and try to lift that thing over those bumps at the intersections. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Richard Mean. I think the last speaker had some very good ideas and thoughts, and that is to put these notices into electrical bills, and also the city should rethink how they communicate with its citizens. But this is a question of failure to communicate, and I think clearly the opportunity to apply for this should be reopened and allow individuals like John to reapply. Also, the wheelchair issue and snow removal may be a disabilities issue, which I think raises some interesting legal questions. Tonight, we recognized Mike Motti, but also there are 3 Sitkans who passed, at least to my knowledge. There have been others, but I wish to recognize someone who is very special to me and over a long period of time, and that's Ethel Lund, my neighbor, Teresa Helam, and her contribution to the community, and Bob Layton, all of who were long-time Sitkans. And I have to give my usual introduction, and that is welcome to this beautiful island community of Sitka, which is 100% dependent on fossil fuels for all of its goods and services. One thing I'd like to suggest to the Assembly is I reviewed the quarterly permanent fund, which was recently released. And I think that should be a quarterly report to the Assembly directly. It was information-packed, it was very revealing, and that it is something that the Assembly can learn about into not only the basics of what their, in essence, reserve funds are within the city, but how they're doing. And it also indicates how the economy at large is doing, because one of the things that the people who manage the fund do is that they give an introduction as to what's going on in the United States and the world as far as money management is, and how is that reflected on their performance. So I think it is very important to have those kind of things, because as we know, there's going to be money being moved, and it'll be interesting if anybody reports on what Senator Stedman said in relation to movement of those funds. But thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving, and we will see you in the new year.
Good evening, Rachel Roy, Director of the Sitka Chamber. I just want to thank the Assembly for supporting the tax-free holiday, which is coming up on Friday and Saturday. I had a really interesting conversation with a visitor yesterday who was here for the holidays. And I said, as she was leaving, I said, you can go and shop Black Friday on Friday if you're here. And she says, oh, I don't do Black Friday shopping. I don't do big box stores. And I was like, well, if you're shopping in Sitka, you're shopping local. And so I just, I think we really have an opportunity to shop local and support local this holiday by not shopping online and rather shopping in our stores and our community. And the Assembly approving that tax-free holiday means that everyone in the community saves that 5%. And so I just really thank you all for supporting that, and also just a different kind of look at Black Friday and Small Business Saturday shopping by doing that in town. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else for persons to be heard this evening? Welcome.
I'm Joanne. Hi, everybody. I appreciate the work that was done on 410 Lake Street with the removal of the garbage from that house. However, only half of it was done, and I've since learned that the person who lives there doesn't have any money to even have garbage service. And in the winter, he has a generator outside to generate heat, so he has no electricity into the house either. So I would appreciate more help with that. And also, I'm affected by what John was saying about the electricity subsidy. I didn't receive any news about that either. And about the snow, the removal of that, they have that cinnamon removal stuff that's supposed to melt the snow. Well, it's poisonous, and it makes my dog scream when he walks on it because it burns his feet. And this is going into the water, including our waters. I would like that to be, all of that cinnamon stuff be removed. It's horrible. And let me see, what else I got? Quick. I think that's kind of it. Oh, yes, in the buses, the ones that pollute all of the diesel, they're black on the back of the buses. I hope they're removed, and by the $3 that we get for every person that comes in, every tourist, that money can be diverted to buses that are electric, so that we don't have all of this smog in the cities, of course. And I'm very concerned about our city not having horrible air. Thank you.
Anyone else for persons to be heard? Seeing none, we'll move on to consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of A, approve the November 8th Assembly meeting minutes. Item B, approve the liquor license renewal application for Ernie's Bar Inc., DBA Ernie's Bar at 130 Lincoln Street.
Second. That's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any public comment? Sarah, on the consent agenda?
On the motion to approve the consent agenda, Mayor Eisenbach,
Yes.
Mr. Peck,
Yes.
Ms. Hemschutz, yes, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
and Ms. Duncan.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Bring us to unfinished business, item C.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-28 on second and final reading, appropriating $2,175,000 to acquire the land needed for the seaplane base project and proceed forward with the full build-out concept as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and second to approve the supplemental appropriations. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Richard Dean. This item is for the seaplane base appropriation. The appropriation is for $2.175 million, and it represents the 6.25% match that we have to provide in order to get the build money. The important thing to note is that this is a process which has taken 20 plus years worth of conversation. At one time, there was no match for it, but now there's a 6.5%. But if you look at what we will be getting, and that is, we'll be spending $2.1 million to get $34 million in build. Now that sounds like incredible leverage, and it sounds wonderfully federal government. Also, we get a bonus of $500,000 over 3 years for maintenance of the dock. The important thing to realize is, which really came out at the last meeting and was emphasized in my mind, is a lot of the planning that they made for this $34 million base was based on 2016 information. And so my question tonight, ACID, the Assembly is the governing body, and they did so unanimously, I think last time, at the last meeting, but the important thing to realize is to do trajectories. And the trajectory is, do you think the economy is expanding or contracting? Where do you think the economy is going to be when it will open in 5 years? Do you think that the fact that Amazon is laying off 10,000 people has anything to do with the state of our consumer economy? And so it's important as you go forward to see, is this just a leverage vote, meaning we're going to get a lot of extra government money, or does this thing actually make sense in the long term? I certainly believe we need a seaplane base, and if we're going to go in, might as well go big. But the important thing is, what is its utilization is going to be? And it would be nice if we had something that was sized appropriately for Sitka. But the wheels are in process. This is 20 years. You can't go back. So $2 million it is, and we will enjoy the benefits of $34 million in a few years, and I hope it will be utilized. Thank you.
Anyone else on the supplemental appropriations for the seaplane base? Assembly deliberation? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support this. I don't think there's a lot of discussion that needs to be had. I'm just going to, for the public, a comment was made to a person that you heard that the information that we have from here is from 2016. That is partially true, but doesn't show the big picture. The study, as far as the cost of this is a design phase that's currently in the works. So I just wanted people to know that listening that this is, in fact, the information is more up to date, much more up to date than 2016. Thank you.
Anything else from the Assembly? Tor?
No, I'm just waiting for the
Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2022-28 on second and final reading, Mr. Yestat?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbach?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Ms. Himshoot?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on second and final reading.
I'll bring us item 2, item D.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-29 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2023 Marine Haul Out Shipyard.
Second.
Has been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 22-29. Is there any public comment?
Just a couple of notes. This is the Sitka Community Hospital net funding that went into the permanent fund, which is approximately $8.1 million. It is possible that since it was placed, it may lose some value, and when it's taken out and placed into GPIP fund, GPIP accounts, it will have a different kind of financial structure. It's a trust, and they will have, in order to keep it liquid, it will be a much more fluid investment, which will have a less return. My only point here is I want to hear it, and I don't know, I guess I'll have to put in a Freedom of Information Act, is who is going to be oversighting the accounting on the GPIP fund. Will this funding be transparent to the public, meaning I can look at it, but also not like the financing thing that's on the web, but something that I can really drill into and understand how the money is being spent? And will there be any form not only of oversight who's managing the accounting, but will there be an audit of these funds at some time? So I think we need to know how this money is going to be handled, who's going to oversight it, and will it be available to be reviewed real time by the public. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on 22-29? Assembly deliberation? Seeing none, Sarah?
Okay, on motion to approve this ordinance on second and final reading, Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Ms. Hampshire?
Yes.
Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
And Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 on item D.
Assembly, it is a little bit early. Wondering if you're interested in taking a break before our next item. I think it's going to be a little bit lengthy. There's a lot to learn. So, okay. We'll take a 5-minute break before we jump into our next item, item E. Into our tonight's agenda, this will bring us to new business. Item E, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2022-30 on first reading, updating Title VI Business Licenses and Regulations of the General Code by revising Chapter 6.19, Regulation of Commercial Operators Selling Organized Excursions or Renting Equipment for Organized Excursions.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve item 22-30 on first reading. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Richard Wien. Unfortunately, 180 seconds is not enough time to speak about this. I read the entire ordinance. There are some very interesting things there. A couple of issues are that with this new bidding system, it's alleged that we may get an additional $45,000 in revenue, up from about $8,500. But it's always good to be interested in revenue. But my question is, when it comes to big revenue, like 500,000 revenue streams in the year, the Assembly doesn't seem to be particularly interested. Some important notations are with the buses. And it is said from less than 7 seats is $250, 7 to 15 seats, $500, 16 to 25, $750, and greater than 30, $1,000. Now my question is, what is the seat capacity of the buses of Alaska coach. And I wondered if it fits in the $1,000 range. If it does fit in the $1,000 range, and you look at the season, in essence, and count the days for the season, it boils down to $5 a day. And to do that to our streets every day for $5 is quite a thing. The thing that's important is that a lot of these vehicles, which are being charged $500, are regular gasoline vehicles, and they have greater pollution controls, but yet all the larger vehicles are diesel. And we've already heard from a prior individual, there's a lot of smoke, a lot of pollution, etc. Their weight and their wear is incredible, and I think that the fees need to be adjusted. And the question becomes, and that's just only one aspect of how this is managed. The buses need not to be on Jeff Davis Street. And you also need to determine venues. I know this only includes like Harrigan Centennial Hall and down by the lightering dock in essence, but the buses, meaning the Alaska Coach, travels all over the city, and they need to be somehow assigned a fee for and be regulated for. And again, there needs to be a fee if they don't have appropriate emission standards. What we're asking for is others. How about California? What's their emission standard for buses like that? But we have no standard, and that seems to be okay. And so much to say, but so little time. 3, 2, 1.
Is there anyone else to speak to 22-30?
Rachel Roy from the Sitka Chamber. I just wanted to I know that there's going to be more discussion, and I wasn't actually able to be at the meeting that this was when it was at the Planning Commission. The one thing that kind of strikes me as I'm looking at it is just how quickly you're going from a very low fee structure to a pretty substantial fee structure if you're talking about small business operators. And there are definitely businesses that can kind of handle that jump. But I think all of us are feeling that, you know, the cost of doing business, the cost of everything is higher. And so just to consider that, and maybe even to consider something of a phased approach into increasing the rates. And I guess I would just like to understand more how the sealed bid works, and I imagine that you'll bring up Amy and we'll hear more. But I do think that it's good that we're doing this before the beginning of the visitor season is here. And I think the more ahead of time that we can give as businesses are planning for operations and all of that, the better. And so I'm glad that we're not doing this in March. And those were my thoughts. Thank you.
Anyone else on 22-30? And John, I apologize. I neglected to give you the opportunity to introduce the item. So please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mayor. If you don't mind, I'll ask Tony and Lenise to come up as well. They can explain, but while they're making their way up here, if you remember back in August, I think it was August, we had a special meeting and sent out personal invites to our current vendors and other folks involved in the tourist and travel industry, and the folks that work, providing excursions in the back of the building and tours. We wanted to make sure we really personally contacted all of them to get them in here and hear some feedback on our plans. Our goal with this was to really organize and rehab our past permitting structure. I mean, it was about a little over 20 years old, I believe, and get our rates at a point, or the permit fees at a point where we can cover our own expenses. I addressed that briefly in the fiscal note, and I think that with Tony and Lanise's work and Brian's help in drafting everything, I think there's a good product here for the assembly to consider. So with that, Tony and Lanise, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Assembly. My name is Tony Woodhouse. I am the Centennial Hall Manager. This is kind of a follow-up from the last time we met on this topic. Essentially what we did was we went from a free-for-all sort of selling out front to a more organized bidding process where area is assigned per person. It's different than what it was, and the fact that now everybody has a fair shot at obtaining one of those. There's only 10, and anything more than that would be kind of chaotic. So that's kind of where we decided was good for the building and good for the city. A lot of this stuff that we developed was through hiring a contractor, and this is.
I'm Lenise Henderson. I own a company called the Professional Development Company, and I think I did an introduction last time I was here. But for the few new people, I have been doing this type of work for about 30 years. I was in tourism for many, many years, a business owner myself. I'm fairly new to Sitka. I've been here for almost 3 years now. And one of the things that I have really enjoyed working with Tony in the city of Sitka is when we started this off, we were looking at the short-term tourism plan and trying to work some of the confusion in the tourism permitting system. And we've been through this forwards and backwards. We've looked at it not only from the city point of view, but from the business's standpoint. We've run numbers. We've gone through revisions. I was just laughing with Tony as I cleared out my notebook at how many different times we've gone over this and refined it. And so as John said, I think we're getting really close, and this is a good product for us. We're happy to answer any questions about what's in the permits or how we got to the numbers or any of that type of things. But thank you for having us here tonight.
Great, thank you both. If there are questions, we'll call you back up. Actually, I guess before, as we've already gone through persons to be here, John, did you have anything else before I don't. Okay, if we've already gone through persons to be heard, do we have any questions? Does the assembly have any questions for the presenters before I have them go up and down and up and down? Great, thank you. We're just trying to maximize your guys' time and efficiency as well. So we appreciate your time this evening.
Actually, I was kind of writing notes here, so a quick question. So, I know we spent a lot of time talking last time about the fee structure and the sealed bid things. It seems like you changed, maybe you didn't, the numbers for the minimum bids. And I see it's 5,000 for the outfitter still, but wasn't it 5,000 before for the, afterwards you changed it to 2,500? And I'll kind of roll it in. And also the vehicle fees, what was the methodology for coming up with those minimum bids and vehicle fees? So kind of 1.5 questions.
Yeah, we had a couple of meetings after we met with all of you and really took a look at the numbers themselves, and John had gotten some information from, tax receipts and all that type of thing at that point. And we brought the sales space number lower than the outfitter number, mainly because with the outfitter $5,000 fee, you're getting extra benefit. You're not only getting your space in the back for your sales and that type of thing, but you're getting storage space. These folks get to store their equipment there and not move it all summer, which is a really great value in my mind. That's an excellent thing for a business to have, that it's in so close proximity to where their customers are. with the sales space, we equaled it to, we ran some very conservative numbers, we made sure that they were low, and looked at what was about 1 day's gross sales. And that was, it's all an estimate at this point because we certainly don't have the individual numbers of individual businesses and what we thought would be fair. And so in our meeting with city administrators, we decided to back down the sales vendor space a little bit and start a little bit lower with that, but keep the outfitter one a little bit higher because of the storage and warehousing space that they're getting all summer. And with the vehicle bus fees, and I heard what the comments were, and that's certainly up to everybody how high or they want to go on those, but this is what we felt was a reasonable start.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I just want to add to that quickly, if you don't mind, while we're still on that topic. With the vehicle fees, one of the goals also was to charge a rate that would be passed through to the customer that was not substantial. I think in most cases, if you take the number of vehicles they have and the number of passengers they could have and the length of days, it comes to about 10 to 15 cents per passenger on each one of the sales. So that was another.
And also remember their minimum bid. So because of the bidding process, the minimum bid is $2,500. The space may actually go for much higher. And the same with the outfitter space. The minimum bid is $5,000. The actual bid may go much higher than that.
Did you catch? So what if they have 27 passengers? Because right now it's 16 to 25 is 750 and 30 or more is 1,000.
Oh, we skipped 5, didn't we? We can make that number adjustment.
And then the two get on for free.
There's always one typo in the thing. You can never get it perfect.
Right. I'm not usually the person to catch it.
We'll correct that, sorry.
We'll look at it. One of the things I just want to mention real quick as well for the Plaza Outfitter space, one of the things that we had talked about, the difference between the two, the plaza and the space, the outfitter space, is the obvious one. They're going to be selling out front. That's the face of their company. Back here, it's more of for storage of everything that they need to run their company, whether it's kayaks or whether it's life jackets or whether it's whatever they need to supplement for their excursion. One of the things that we made sure that we tried to do, that's in here as well, is that we made sure that we had different measurements for back there. One of the things when we were developing this, and we had some public comment on, well, what about Sitka Music Fest? And what about, one of the things that draws people to Sitka is the view from the auditorium. So that's one of the reasons why in the sealed bid for the front, they're actually bidding on a number square. Highest bidder is to choose the number between 1 and 10, and they're all, I think you all have now the attachment. We're going to also do a different attachment that has numbered squares for up front. For the back, though, it's going to be left in my decision to where I put them. So what they're bidding on is an opportunity to park.
I guess I have a couple more questions there.
Sure.
So first of all, can somebody bid on more than one space?
That's one of the questions that we had been talking about. It doesn't reflect it in here, and that's something we might want to add, but for the bidding process, what we were planning on doing was having 2 different rounds of bidding. First round of bidding is going to be between a certain date to a certain date. If there's still squares or spaces available in the back, we're going to then, on a second date, a different week and a half, 2 week, that they can bid on a second round if we still have available spots.
That's not what I meant. I meant, let's say I want to have a big outfitter and I put down a $30,000 bid on each space.
Yes.
Can I do that?
No. So what I'm getting at is after that second round is closed, then all bidding's closed. And that'll be, if there's 2 spots left out there, 1 spot left out there, then that'll give the opportunity to anybody else that wants to possibly get a second spot out there.
So they'll only be allowed to bid on one space?
They're only allowed to bid on one space to make it fair for everybody, yes.
Okay. So the other question I had is, did you give thought to multi-year permits? Because I know that one of the things we heard was people invest a lot of money in their equipment, in their gear, in their business, and they didn't like the uncertainty of not knowing if they're going to have a permit the next year.
And so I know we talked about 3 years or something like that.
We did consider multi-year, and we also consider a phased approach to this because my concern was if we had issued multi-year permits in this first year, I don't think we're going to hit our goal of allowing or removing barriers to entry to other folks to come in. So if we put them all out for 2 or 3 years and then they're all purchased in that first year, it's 3 more years before anybody else can get a chance. So our hope is in this first year, we see what the appetite is and then maybe revisit this ordinance a year or 2 later to see if we want to change it to multi-year or consider a phased approach to it.
Crystal?
A couple of questions within the ordinance. So page 4, section 3, the appeal procedure. Does that go to section G, or is it just left non-specific? Because in section G, you do discuss an appeal and it gets pretty detailed. This one just says you may appeal to the administrator.
Can you tell us the line number on that?
I don't have it. I wrote down page 4, section 3.
Okay. Line 186.
Yes.
And 185.
So Chris, what was your question?
Well, the section G gets into the appeal process, so I know that this is basically saying within 2 years you can't have gotten in trouble, so to speak. But it does reference that you can appeal if you did get in trouble, right, to the administrator, but it's not specific. Did you just want to leave that general, whereas in section G we get very specific?
I can speak to that if you'd like. This C3 on page 4, starting on line 183, deals with the circumstances where an application is denied. So it's itself. The other sections that have a more particular due process, this is the legal type of stuff that I put in, has a more robust due process type of review for when a license was suspended or revoked as opposed to an application being denied.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why there's a distinction between the two.
So we treat those very differently.
Correct.
Okay. What about page 4, section 4, the prior notice? So this basically was lined through, I think it referenced if there was an event or something. What sort of prior notice are we giving to vendors? Will that be at the beginning of the season? They're made aware that they won't be able to park there or sell on certain dates?
It was left broad because the issue may arise quickly. So the city may want to have a function that's happening where they have to tell the permittees that there's certain times of day that Tony needs to not have them put out there for a special event, and to put a specific amount of days in there, I thought it would have put too much burden on the variability of the HCH manager even knowing when those events would occur. So that's why it was left open.
Do you have examples of what these events might be?
Actually, one that we had, and it was put together within probably 3 weeks, was the beer fest we had for Alaska Day. That was put together real quickly. It was put together in the front, but they did have an opportunity to go in the back if they wanted to, something like that. We did have stuff parked back there. We still had stuff parked back there. We were still trying to get stuff out, but for example, that would be one, something like that.
Okay. And I guess my only pushback on that is the complaints over I paid so much money and you're telling me I have to close, or you're not giving me notice of when I have to close. I can hear that coming from businesses, so that's why I brought up that one.
And it's one of those things where I would last ditch, kind of deal to have somebody.
What about page 8, section G? It talks earlier about the sealed bidding process, but when does item G come into play?
So if you look at either of the permits, a lot of the timelines have been left empty. One of the prerequisites to actually being able to apply for a permit is to have all your information ready. They can have this application, they can fill it all out, but this is going to be accompanied with a lot of the stuff that is in that section. If you look through it, there's sections in here that actually have check marks that they need to go through and bring in that stuff to be even afforded an opportunity for a permit.
Okay, and it doesn't designate a completed application, so it does say up to you to ultimately define based off of other kind of characteristics, and it kind of outlined them. So from what I understand, sealed bid, highest bidder wins, and you're kind of going through and just ensuring that it's a completed application for consideration?
Well, that would happen before they have the opportunity to bid.
Okay.
We would make sure that they are eligible to bid on a square.
Okay, so did I read it correctly that you would ultimately have authority to deny a permit?
Based on the criteria of their eligibility, yes.
Okay. And then line 462 is repeating what is laid out in page 4, section 3. Was that done purposely? It's verbatim, just placed in 2 sections. So I'm guessing we wanted to emphasize.
What page are you talking about again?
Line
Page 10.
And then the repeat was on page 4, section 3. You can see I finally got down to putting down line numbers at the very end, so I apologize.
This ordinance addresses different types of permits, so that section is repeated in each of the different types of permits.
Gotcha. And then the last one, so the number of passenger buses that are loading and unloading, I kind of remember us having a question about that, and I just wanted to follow up because I don't remember what the answer was, but there's not going to be a limited number who can apply for the permit to offload and pull through. Is that correct? Was congestion a problem this last summer, or we're feeling comfortable about that?
Congestion was a problem. Congestion will always be a problem.
Okay.
Unless we look for alternative spots to drop off. But the purpose of that was to kind of keep track of everybody and to make sure that people are able to help with the vehicles that they're driving. And I think that it was brought up earlier tonight about some of the concerns that they had about some of the bigger vehicles, the diesel and smoke and oil and that kind of stuff. So.
And since congestion was a problem, this permit process is a way to address that problem. No, there's not necessarily a limit on the number of vehicles. However, there were a lot of vehicles that we weren't aware of. They might be selling excursions somewhere else online, and they're telling their customers, just meet us at Harrigan Hall, and they'll come driving through some certain area and pick up their customers. Now, to do that, that is addressed in this ordinance, so they'll have to have some sort of identifying sticker on the vehicle to show they're authorized to be there, and that should hopefully prevent unauthorized vehicles operating in these excursions or these outside sales from using Harrigan Hall without paying the permit fee to operate.
Yeah, and one of the reasons is because 99.9% of the time that anybody gets picked up here, it's because of the convenience of everything that we offer, bathrooms and information and all of that kind of stuff. And that was part of the thought that went into the loaded and unloaded as well.
Thank you so much. Those were my questions.
Rebecca?
Yeah, I have a number of questions and I'm not sure who they go to, so I'll just fire away and you can redirect me if I'm aiming towards the wrong person. I also had a question about the prior notice of special events. I'm really worried by leaving that undefined, you know, what do we do? You've got 24 hours to move your stuff, and that's within the bounds of this. If I were an operator, I would be very uncomfortable with that, so I'm just gonna make that comment. There's not really a question, I think Crystal covered it. What about access to electricity and water sources? Can any of the outfitters or vendors use, I assume we have outside hose bibs here or outside outlets? Is that, I didn't see it addressed in here.
At this time, it's not offered.
It's not offered, so we do have those things outside the building, but vendors and operators are not allowed to hook up a hose or an extension cord.
Part of it is it's very limited, and it's, what we're trying to do is make it fair for everybody. And if somebody has it, then we want to make sure it's available for everybody. We just don't have those kind of resources right now.
Okay, and then I also had a thing about the appeals process, because it says the appeals go to the administrator and then to the courts. Like there's no local recourse, no planning and zoning appeal or no assembly appeal, and that feels, what was, maybe that's a question to Brian, to go from the administrator straight to the courts and not have any other local option. Is that typical for this kind of permit?
Well, it's typical in our code, and that's what we've done. We did go away from that and have another layer, you know, to the assembly. It's something that I kept from a administration point of view. It's easier to do. There are other code sections that once you go from the director of the program to the administrator, then you can go to a hearing officer. There's certain kind of things you can do, or you can go to a commission, some kind of police and fire for tickets and stuff like that. But you see, this isn't based on criminal or minor offense or violations that can be cited by the police department. These are notice of violations that are handled by the HCH manager. They're civil fines that we can only enforce through the civil process and not through the criminal process. So I think it behooves us not to make the process too complicated.
Okay, that's great.
But we could make it more complicated if that's the desire of the
Absolutely not. And then the lines 501 through 508 delineating responsibilities was deleted. And I don't know if I just didn't figure it out, but that sort of clarification of who's responsible for what, does it all now land on Tony and that's assumed, or was it spelled out somewhere and I missed it?
Well, I think in the previous code, the enforcement was delineated between the harbor master, the police, and the HCH manager for specific reasons, because we didn't have it specifically laid out whose responsibilities it were. So now we're being real specific. All the parking and the vendor spaces and the outfitter spaces, it's all being controlled by the HCH manager. And there's no need to have any discussion of delineation between the other departments, because that's covered in other sections of our code. You know, Stan has the ability to do parking on the docks already within his code section. The police have their motor vehicle responsibilities, so we don't need to repeat that in this code. We just need to make it clear what Tony's responsibilities are.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I looked at the applications, and application number 4, I don't even know what that is, but application number 4 says all names who will be conducting business under the permit have to be included on the permit. I know there's so much turnover and some are higher, and so does that mean they have to continuously not only find staff, but then update their permit? Is that what we're asking of the businesses? And if that's what we're asking, I'd like to understand why.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I contemplated trying to put code language that got that in there, and I just defaulted to this, tell us about everybody and let Tony manage that, as opposed to try to lay it out specifically in the code, because you're exactly right, there is a lot of turnover. What I'm more worried about is the business needs to be responsible. they can have all the employees want, and we cover that by saying, this involves you and your employees. But a lot of these businesses are owned by several people, and we want them to sign off as responsible for their conducting themselves under the permit when they get the permit. The owners need to. So if there's an LLC or a corporation or just someone who does business as, we want those people to all sign up and make responsibilities. So when something goes wrong, one of them can say, I'm not responsible, and the other one says, we only have one of the two people that are technically kind of contractually bound by us. So I think it would behoove us again to make sure that if someone comes up and says, this is the name of our business, we want to know every person who owns that business or is a principal to the entity of the business. And we're not so concerned about all the employees that run through, because they're covered by the general language of the code that says that you are responsible as a business and for anybody that represents you as the business.
So we're not actually asking to know the name of each kayak guide in each, that's not what that says.
That's not what that's for. Yeah, we're trying to get the people, the business principals and owners to sign up for this and make themselves responsible.
And then my last question is probably for Brian, but when we provide a permit to a vehicle that's going to be dropping off, can we require an emissions test? That they passed an emissions test somewhere?
Well, I think you can require it, but I think the philosophy behind this new code section is not to get, at least for this, is not to get involved in that. I mean, what this code says is that if you operate a vehicle, you have to follow the laws of the state of Alaska and the city of Sitka, the vehicle laws. And we're not going to have another layer that we require our police department or our HCH manager to administrate emission controls or safety, type of concerns. Those things are all already required by our state and city laws, and not for, we're leasing space here. We're not controlling how people run their business completely. Now, so the short answer to your question is, yes, we could have those kinds of, we could have safety inspection rules, but we kept those out of there.
Okay, well, the number one thing that I've been hearing is buses, and the diesel fumes. And so it might be valuable for us to look at that.
Let me speak to that. This code is just talking about buses pulling into the plaza area of our HCH. It doesn't address controlling what happens on the roadways of Sitka. And I didn't look at it under those contexts and whether or not we could actually do that.
Can we ask buses not to idle for more than 1 minute? And then how do we enforce that? But, people talk about walking past the buses and being while they're idling in front of the building as one of many issues I've heard about the buses. So I just want to make sure that whatever we do, we're doing it to the needs of our people.
Yeah, and my answer, the short answer is yes, you can have this. I mean, we can say, you're going to pull into our parking lot, you can't keep your bus running, but if we do that, we've got to enforce it. And do we want to enforce it under these circumstances? Do we want to put these vendors under the pressure of having to do that and then being either suspended or revoking their permits because they left their vehicle on for a couple of minutes? That's a policy question I'll leave up to you.
I'd like to address that just quickly. One of the things that we have done in this last year was we had them sign a tourism best practices sheet. And what that basically is, it's kind of like a code of conduct. You're not going to be hawking next to your vehicle. You're going to be respectful. You're going to be picking up litter or anything around your area. Those kind of things. And one of those things is that they're not going to be idling their vehicles. And one of the things that I'm constantly made aware of, and I try to handle then and there, is when one of the vendors comes and say, they're idly, we can't even breathe, I can't even hear the person, me or my staff will go out there and we'll address it. Then and there, we don't kind of wait around and get to them next time. We go right out there and we try to address it. They've been really good here lately. This last year, they were really good about turning the vehicles on. And so I hope that stewardship keeps going into the next year. And that's one of the things that we do try to squash right then and there.
So the code of conduct is with the operator, and then we trust that person is sharing that with each driver through seasonal turnover and all of that. So.
Yes.
And one of the great things that Tony did this year, and I was there, we did 2 meetings at the beginning of the season. We had an owner-operator meeting, and then we had a driver meeting. And we would be wonderful to get as much compliance with that as possible. And we talked a lot about idling vehicles. We had maps of which ways you enter and exit. We just did a really great pre-season training, and I would encourage that to happen every year. I think it makes a big difference.
Okay. And then I had one last concern that I don't know if there's a question involved, but I'll just put it out there because maybe you guys thought about this. It seems like you've thought about just about everything, which is awesome. So I am uncomfortable using only bids to measure who should be doing business on city property. And so I'm going to go back to something I said at our first meeting, which is I really value the people who've been in business here for 20 or more years, and I want to give them a leg up in the competitive process. I really value businesses that are hiring locally. I want to give them a leg up wherever I can. Businesses who are hiring more people, I want to support them more than other businesses. So there are these important things that are important to me for people running a business in my town. How do we capture those things? And so I envision some kind of a bid process where there's a minimum bid and maybe a maximum bid, because what I don't want is for some company to come from outside and be able to buy up just by outbidding everyone else the spaces that we have available and closing out one of our local businesses that's been here for a really long time. And maybe that's an unrealistic fear, but it's a fear I have that we somehow shut out the people who've operated here for a really long time in good faith. Have we considered safety and compliance, that says you can't be in arrears with the city, so I appreciate that. But what about a safety record? So I don't know if there's room. You've got an excellent document here, and for me to come in kind of at the last minute and say, I want this done differently, but I don't know that this captures what's important to me about our local businesses fully. So that's, I guess, a comment and maybe a question of, I brought it up last time, and I don't know if there's some barrier to, I hesitate to even use the word again, but to using a rubric when we consider the factors that make the businesses the ones we want operating on city property.
I can address that really quickly, and then I'd like you guys to jump into if you have other thoughts. We did our best to capture a lot of those concerns in the code. We want it to be local businesses. If you look through there, you'll see that in the permits that they have to be operating within the bounds of the city and borough. I think they need to have a city and borough mailing address. Right. So and Tony talked about the process of everybody gets one space. So that's another tool that we can use to keep somebody from buying all 10 of the spaces and pushing everyone out. The timeline is another thing that's important. If we do 1 year, we allow more opportunities to have spaces open up for newer businesses that want to give it a shot here. It may not fully address it at the beginning, but we're taking our best shot to make sure we can capture all of that. Something else to consider too, though, is I would hope that you mentioned the businesses that have been here for 20 plus years. I would hope that if a business had been operating in this manner for 20 plus years, at some point they would grow beyond that point that they can move on to somewhere else, maybe have their own property, their own storefront. Because the intent here is to have some of the smaller businesses that may not be able to afford their own building, their own storage lot, put in restroom facilities. I see this kind of as the starting point. So we hope that they grow and then, expand their business into somewhere else. Again, like I said, we tried to capture that as best we could, and I'm sure there will be hiccups along the way, but I hope we addressed most of it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess I would just point out, some businesses aren't intended to become bigger. Some businesses are a family operation and will always be a family operation. And I would hate to see them closed out, or that we ever grow so big that we don't have room for the family businesses. So thanks for considering those thoughts.
Other questions for Tim?
Thank you. I was at your previous meeting, so this has been an interesting read, and I'm impressed with the effort that's gone into it and the thoughtfulness. I do have a couple things, though. I'm curious whether you considered a per passenger price on vehicles to encourage people to get smaller ones. And then you have something about electric vehicles get a 50% discount or something, and I'm wondering if it might be worthwhile to give them a pass, so you can go for free for 3 years, and then we'll start bringing that process in. So, really entice people to, because I mean, the bus thing is a big deal. And Brian was active, I had the same comment. We're really talking about buses on city property. We're not talking about buses on state roads, and that's a whole different issue. We may want to address that in a different way, but this is a necessary vehicle to do that. I'd like to give a little more teeth to the no idle process, so that the Centennial Hall can enforce that, if there's a fine or if there's something like that to help with that process and really encourage that to take place. I know there's a lot of driver turnover, so maybe not just having the one time where you talk with the drivers, but to ongoingly talk with drivers so that they do that. And I'm curious about what your reevaluation process is for this. So, what is the cycle that we're going to look at this and see how what worked in the middle of it? Do we need to change along the way? After the first round of bids, do we need to take a look at it and see whether or not this captures what we want? Because I share Rebecca's concern about, it says you have to have a business in Sitka, but big corporations can set up 5 businesses in Sitka, and then each one of them can bid on a spot and they'll all work together, so, because they're the same company. So I'm concerned about that sort of thing, and that's only because of my experiences during the summer in some of the other communities in Southeast where it gets very commercial. So I like us, I think we've benefited through the years of not being those places, and I know we're bumping up against that potential. So those are my questions, but I'm impressed with what I see so far.
I have a couple comments about that. I've always been a big fan of mid-season meetings, and it's hard because everyone's so busy and, it's difficult to find a day when they can happen. But, getting the drivers together or the operators together mid-season and just how's this going, what's going well, what's not going well, it's always been beneficial when you can pull those off, which I think is great. The electric vehicle thing is 100% up to all of you. We can do whatever you want with that, because I think encouraging that is a great idea, because it's what we're all hearing when we're out there. So that's really up to the assembly, whatever you want to, how much you want to encourage that and what you want to do with that. And we can put some, talk about putting some teeth in the no idle thing and make sure that in the preseason meetings, that's a big deal too. Yeah.
Any further questions for our presenters? Great, thank you guys for your time. Much appreciate the insight. Kevin, you had other lines of thought?
No, I was just waiting for the general discussion.
If you're ready.
I'm ready. Please. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for making this happen. I think a lot of work has been put into this. I was fortunate to be able to be part of one of the early meetings to get my eyes on some of these ideas. Bottom line, I think that if somebody wants to have them add some tweaks to it, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with passing it as is. I do like that, and my point is passing it as is, and then the great part of this is that, now that I'm thinking this through in the comments, the permits being issued only for 1 year, the first year is a really good idea, especially since, you know, we may have, you know, the staff will probably have some mid-season meetings, probably just to get take on how things are going, but post-season, I think, I would hope, I believe that we should do a real good drill down into how this worked and maybe make some changes, update these things. So that really helps us having the 1 year permits. If we didn't, we'd be locked into this and we wouldn't really be able to benefit from any changes. From the comments I've heard, I do agree having the no idle is probably a good little teeth in there would probably be a good idea. And I do share some Ms. Simsh's concerns about trying to, there's other things besides money to the value that they bring. Although I think trying to tweak that right now, I think it's you know, November, but the season will be on us before we know it. So I would like to put more thought and consideration for that. I just don't know that for this season, you know, I don't know that we have the time for that, but I would like to consider that in the future. And then the electric vehicle, the incentive that Mr. Pike just mentioned, I really like that a lot. More aggressive incentive. I think for 3 years of you know, no fees, that would hopefully, I mean, electric buses are pretty expensive. There's no way around it right now, but you know, having a better, stronger incentive might really help. I think that would be a great thing. I wouldn't mind having it added and then rereading this ordinance. I'm okay with passing it as is and changing it next year. I'd like to hear other people's comments. Jordan?
Yeah, just before I start out, I think Tim's idea was right. I right on it as well. So I've been thinking about this. I think that there's a few things. I think a graduated ramping up of the minimum bids might make sense. I mean, something like 800 the first year, next year, or the year after that, 1,600, and then following on to 2,500 for the commercial spaces, and 3,000, and then 3,000, and then 5K for the outfitter, allows people to. We've talked a lot about how we're going to kind of see how this goes, and that way we're not experimenting at the full price. And so I'm not going to make any motions yet, but I think that something like that makes sense. Graduating it up so it's not a real surprise. You know, I don't think it's going to be a surprise at this point, but it's not such a hit to them. And again, that's just the minimum bid. It may wind up coming in significantly higher anyway. And then on the vehicle fees, they seem pretty good up until we get to the 25 or 30, whatever it was. But then the 30 plus being 1,000, I'd like to see us either add another one saying 60 plus, and that's 2,000, or we make it 30 plus 2,000. I think that that's a reasonable for that large of a, you know, and considering the amount of space and that a full-size bus takes, and also the part of the reason we're doing this is to help offset the wear and tear on the Centennial Building. Sorry, HCH, this sounds weird. When you have 60 or 70 people coming in, that's a much more of a load on the Centennial Building. So I don't think 2,000 is out of line for a full-size bus, and I don't know if we need to if we would need to add another category for the large bus, or just make the 30 plus that category. A couple other points of what we were talking. I think I'd like to see a 10-day notice on minimum for, okay, we need the Centennial Building. I don't think that's onerous on us because we usually know more than 10 days out. And of course, we'll do it as soon as we know it, but 10 days gives them a little bit of time to scramble at least. And then finally, trying to how to give any kind of local preference. I'm not sure how to do that, but maybe what we would do is give permit holders from the previous year the tiebreaker. So if I have towards fishing excursions or whatever, and I put it out there and I bid, $3,000 this year, if I bid $3,000 the next year and somebody else bids $3,000, I would get the tiebreaker. I don't know, that's just an idea that I thought when I was looking at this thing, how we could do, it would help a little bit. It's not a cure-all by any stretch, but I think we would be starting to get into some questionable legal territory if we tried to say, okay, if you're a local business now, you get preference. And then I guess I have one final question before I pass it up, and maybe you guys think those are terrible ideas. Does the state require emissions testing now on buses? No. So maybe that isn't, if we were saying, well, we have to count on the state to do that, and they're not, maybe, they say in order to get your permit, and we don't have to do it, they just include, like they do down south, where you gotta go to your shop and somebody says, yeah, you pass and you can't get your vehicle registration until then, so you say, goes in with the permit that you've got a current emissions test. I don't know. Throw that out.
Chris?
I kind of share towards reservations with the minimum bid, mainly the 2,500 and 5,000 one. I'm not totally against it, but I'm scared for year one. Maybe it's a little steep. But I'm curious to hear what everyone else has to say about that. I really started trying to think about what is the most fair for everyone, and I take my own industry a little bit into consideration because I own permits for my own fisheries, and it's not a bid process, it's a free market. And I own my permit until the day I decide to sell it. And I started thinking, well, is that fair in this instance? But it's only 10 spaces. So I do believe that this bid thing is probably the most fair, but maybe eventually we do start looking at some longer term, some 3-year stuff that I know was talked about during was that a work session or that happened this fall? But I do like the idea of just this first year, just a 1-year shot, and come back and see how it goes. When it comes to the buses and their emissions, electric buses are cost prohibitive. Honestly, I think I've heard estimates of $1 million per bus, so that would be pretty hard for anyone to pull that off and make it financially feasible. Emissions wise, it scares me what that starts to open. Then are we going to start emission testing all of our dump trucks and every other diesel vehicle that's in this town? I'm scared of where that may end up. But I would like to see some teeth on the idling buses here because that seems to be a large complaint. So I think that should be definitely addressed. In general, I do like what's been put forward to us, and I believe in pay to play. You want to run a business on the city property, you need to pay, and I do in my own business. I pay my mortgage rates, I pay a raw fish tax, so I definitely pay to play to operate in this municipality. So in general, I do like what is being put before us.
So this, I think I'm going to come from a slightly different perspective, but I think by the end I'm at the same spot everybody else is. I start this discussion by considering, in my opinion, we have no obligation to provide any of these spaces. I don't think that it's in code. I don't think that there is any requirement that we give businesses the opportunity to operate here. Now, that being said, I encourage the opportunity for businesses to operate here. Very clearly, this space has value. If the space didn't have value, we wouldn't have people clamoring to get these spaces right now. So I think our mission tonight, actually, as I understand our mission tonight, is to determine the value for that space. How much do we want to charge for these spaces? A ramp-up approach has been suggested. I believe this is a ramped-up approach. I don't believe that these values are astronomical at the time being for what you actually get. While your individual space out front might be small, you essentially get this entire building that's open to the public as your area to conduct business. And I believe that to be very important in the conversation on cost. This isn't my 10 by 10 space. This is a bathroom facility. This is facilitators. This is an area for people to come and sit and wait for your business. So you're getting a lot more than simply the space that is being provided in front of you. Ties are I'm switching gears a little bit here. Ties in bidding process. Brian, is there anything that you remember from this? If two organizations for the last space did the exact same, is there a tie-breaking procedure?
Yes, the code says if there's a tie, you select who gets the first selection by random choice. So in other words, if there's 3 people for one last space, or for the last 3 spaces, they would draw the numbers out of a hat or something.
Okay, so I'm glad to hear that there is a tie-breaking procedure. Part of me wants to go to past performance, if you've been here before and operated successfully, but that kind of gets away from John's, let's start new businesses here, let's have this as an incubator for businesses to test the water to see if that they're able to survive on their own in a larger in a larger operation. So I'm glad to know that there's a tie-breaking procedure. I don't know which way I would lean on that. And then finally, for consideration, Brian, it's been mentioned that one organization can only bid on one space. A larger parent company could have multiple LLCs underneath, multiple DBAs. Is there anything preventing that route right now? So if my parent corporation has 2 LLCs, or I decide to split my business into 2 LLCs so that I can bid on 2 of the outfitter spaces right next to each other, do we have a mechanism to prevent that?
We don't have it in code right now. Right now, it doesn't say expressly only one person. Where we have is, code says the ACH manager, as approved by the administrator, can make rules and regulations. And one of those rules and regulations is we're only going to get 1 permit per person. You know, we thought about this in the context of do we put the minimum bid in the code now, or do we not? And I think what we heard at previous meetings was we want the minimum bid in the code, but because the assembly wanted control over that. But some of these other rules and regulations, like the one I just mentioned about how many spaces an individual or an entity could bid on, is left to the discretion of the HH manager as approved by the administrator.
Okay, I think I'll follow up with you on that. I think we're speaking the same language, but I might not be interpreting it correctly tonight, so I'll follow up with you on that.
Sure.
And I think that's all I had. Like I said, my perspective is a little bit different from our obligation to provide, but at the end I get to the same spot of I want to be able to provide this as an incubator, as a continuing business, and this space is absolutely a premium. You could theoretically have 500,000 visitors dropped off at your business's front door. And if you don't think that's a premium, then why are there people clamoring to get those spaces? So I think it's extremely valuable. I don't think we should sell ourselves short on what we're going to be getting out of here. And I appreciate a process now that sounds as if it's going to be as fair and equitable as possible for now. Of course, edits and modifications can be made down the road, but it gives people an opportunity to conduct business while making sure that none of the business operations fall back on the burden of the taxpayer. John, you have some comments?
I do, really quickly, just from hearing the conversation here, and I don't want this to come across as the just pass the bill to find out what's in it. That's definitely not where I'm coming from on this one. But the reason this is coming forward right now, and we're a little further behind than where we hoped to be at this point, is so we can provide the businesses with as much heads up as possible. In a routine year, we would hope to be doing the bid process, was it in October, Tony? So we want them to know before the turn of the new year what to expect for that next summer. So I'm hearing a lot of potential changes, and I think those are great changes, but I want to be extremely cautious on, conversations and meetings while I'm there during this visit.
I would definitely agree with that. The focus has shifted from marketing to more of a negotiation type stance while we're there. We had a meeting with our local CLIA representatives, and I actually asked the question if they saw any value in sending us, because we kind of got that part out of the way. We're very successful in the cruise industry right now. And they suggested that it was still important to get face-to-face time with the executives from the companies, and they offered to set up any of the meetings that we would want to have. So we'll go out with a strong portfolio of meetings before we even leave Sitka, in order to preserve what Sitka is to Sitkans. And I think at least the CLIA representatives are well aware of my stance on that, and I know that they've been helping us out. So, any questions from assembly members? Any discussion on Rebecca?
Right, thanks. Last year you guys stopped in DC. Was that not valuable, or is there, why is that not included on this year?
Last year, it was simply due to the timing of sea trade, and if we were going to the East Coast, I was going to try to get as much as I could out of it, and it was one of those, I usually get the congressional calendar every year so I can see when both the House and the Senate are in session, and we're actually going to have representatives there. They changed the dates for sea trade by about a month this year, and I don't have that calendar yet, so I wasn't able to pool those trips together. However, both of those trips are in the budget, and if I get that calendar and it's going to work out, we may modify the trip to try to take advantage of both opportunities.
I appreciate that. And then the Visitor Enhancement Fund, where do those funds come from?
Tell me if I'm wrong, but the Visitor Enhancement Fund is coming from our vet tax.
Okay, and so we don't have enough quite to cover this trip. Do we need to be changing the amount designated for travel, and is that something the Assembly does, or is that what you do in your budget?
Again, just you correct me if I'm wrong, but it is in the budget for $5,000. When I say it exceeded budget, it's just simply because the travel costs went up. Airfare is more expensive, hotels are more expensive, and I still need to talk to Rachel about any of the group rates or the hotel incentives that may come with group reservations. I simply did the travel estimates based off of the GSA rates for per diem and flights and all the stuff that goes into a normal travel request. But an overrun of approximately $500 is not going to kill the fund, but we still do need to make the fund right for the accounting purposes.
I guess I was just looking down the road, and it's not going to get cheaper, so. Okay, thank you.
Chris and Kevin, the tour.
So it's coming out of the Visitor Enhancement Fund, but this is kind of more of a cruise ship event. Why are we not able to take it out of the head tax?
That's a good question and a complicated question. I'll go back to that head tax is a law, and that the review on uses of that fund has to ensure that the appropriation of those funds directly contributes, or directly benefits the traveler. Or directly benefits the cruise, or the cruise passenger.
I mean, could we argue good relations with the cruise industry does benefit the cruise?
I feel we would be litigated on an expenditure like that.
Okay.
Having sat in enough meetings that, yeah, I think we're on dangerous grounds there.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to say that I'm relieved, very relieved to hear from John and Stephen that the nature of the strategy for going has changed. I think that you were right. I think we've all heard loud and clear. I agree with that. I'm sorry, I lost my it's okay. I think we've all heard loud and clear that, and I agree with this, that we don't want the character of Sitka to change. I don't. We want to encourage in tourism, we want to hear, but we don't want to basically run us over. And I've always felt that a face-to-face conversation with these people, these organizations, is always much better than kind of punitive measures, which some people would like. And because, this is just kind of a fact that to destroy, it takes years of hard work to build economic activity and support that, and that has happened because our numbers were down for quite a long time. It has taken countless resources by the city, by the chamber, as well as other private organizations to get these numbers up. So it's really easy to destroy that relationship if we went the route of some sort of limits or punitive measures. I mean, if it ever got to the point where we had to, we have to do what we have to do. But if we can do it with a positive, healthy relationship with these organizations where they understand, they don't want, we want to have benefit, and they want to have a benefit in a way that works for both of us, I think that's always much better. So I will fully support it, and I want to thank you for listening and, having that different kind of strategy. Sure.
Yeah, I just think it's important that we keep the lines of communication open. And that's what this is about. I mean, it is interesting how it has changed from trying to get more people here to, okay, now we've got to manage it, but we've got to be able to talk to people. And I know that we're talking to reps, but that's not the same when you can get in the room with VPs and presidents. So I would support this, and maybe hopefully the DC trip could be folded into it, in which case then we're not over budget because it'll be. But we've got to keep the lines of communication open with the cruise ship industry, because our avenues for control might be too much of us, but for managing the number of people, we don't have very many legal ones, but we have plenty of communication and agreement avenues.
Further discussion on this? Sarah, I see.
And we don't actually have a motion, it's just a discussion direction item, so.
Is general consensus
Yes.
sufficient on this
Yes.
item? Because I know we do have to just bring it forward for the approval of the names essentially, as it is budgeted. So general consensus is okay?
Yes.
Okay, I haven't heard anyone opposed to the names or that are being sent. If there's anyone that'd like to speak against that, would love to hear it. My wife would really love to hear it as well, but, all right.
I think that's great.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. I do agree that the DC trip was extremely valuable. Hopefully we can do it all in one. The 6-hour flight is not my idea of a relaxing afternoon, so hopefully we can do all those at the same time. That'll bring us to item G then, which is accepting the resignation of Assemblymember Rebecca Himshoot.
I move to formally accept the resignation of Assemblymember Rebecca Himshoot and determine the procedure for filling the vacant seat.
Second.
Hey, you weren't supposed to do that.
It's been moved and seconded to formally accept the resignation of Rebecca Himshoot. Is there any public comment?
motion was made, this is Richard Ween, the motion was made with such enthusiasm, it almost seems like a feats don't fail me now moment. But I hope that you will have fond memories of your times on the assembly, and I just wanted to wish you congratulations. And Juneau has, Fred Myers, and we hope as part of your new thing that you'll take orders to bring back when you come back to Sitka. Anyway, thank you very much, as they say, for your service. And you waited to turn those on at this moment. Can we have the lights lowered here for full effect? Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on accepting the resignation of Rebecca Henshaw? Assembly discussion?
I didn't really know Rebecca when she got on, but I've obviously worked with her a lot, and I've gained a tremendous amount of respect and learned from you too. And I just want to thank you for your time on here.
Sarah, on accepting the resignation?
Okay, on the motion to accept the resignation, Mr. Moser,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbach,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Ms. Hemshoot,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Ms. Duncan. Yes, motion passes 7-0.
The second part of tonight's process, we do now have to go through a process of filling a vacant assembly seat. This is an assembly process, and what I've laid out in front of you is the exact same process we just used to fill a seat. So if the assembly agrees with that process, there is a motion. If there's discussion on that one, we can talk about how we would change the process for the next. Tor?
I move to request the municipal clerk through the municipal administrator to, one, advise for letters of interest November 23rd through noon, December 12th, and two, place an item on the December 13th agenda to appoint an assembly member to fill the vacant seat until the next regular election.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to advertise for letters of interest until December 12th, and then fill that seat on December 13th. Is there any public comment on the process?
Richard Ween. The Assembly is a governing body of the City of Sitka and Borough of Sitka, and that it may do in this particular matter as it will. Last process was very interesting, and I always find these things fun, and so I'll say have at it, and I'm interested.
Is there anyone else on the procedures for filling the seat? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to request the municipal clerk to advertise for letters of interest and place an item on the December 13th agenda to appoint an assembly member to fill the vacant seat until the next regular election. Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbach?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Ms. Hemshoot?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Mr. Yestad?
Yes.
And Mr. Moser?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. That would bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Richard Ween, so much to talk about and bring up. As far as the cruise line industry goes, you know that in every other city that's been around, they've been very predatory over time. What you see is more and more businesses that are owned by cruise line or subsidized by cruise line. And as seasonalization occurs, this is currently occurring here in Sitka. It may look good now, but some of the concerns that were raised, for example, by Ms. Hemshoot, are very real. If you look at Home Depot and Office Depot and all these things, and then you look at mom and pop industries in small towns, they're gone. And these people really need to have a consideration. And it's important, you say you're going to Florida to negotiate. Well, the bottom line is, one, can you negotiate for the city? You're basically going down as individuals. I think it would behoove the assembly to write up a list of what they thought negotiating points were. And they have the money, and they're going to have the hospitality suite, which sounds okay to me. The most important thing about going down to the Sea Cruise Festival is that we get a good comprehensive report when you return. I think that's worth the price of admission. And over the years, it's been fairly sketchy as to getting reports back. Last year, by the way, was a very active orthopedic year. Just because nobody came to a meeting and said, well, we didn't, fracture our skull. It's not true. It's easy to find out. The city has access to EMS ortho runs, as well as Surge could be a willing partner to give us an idea of what winter really means here. And it's not necessarily snow, it's also ice. And that becomes another basic issue. All kinds of little asterisks here. By the way, the 2016 data was for airplane use. Has nothing to do with design that I was talking about. Is they built it according to what their anticipation was for airplanes. By the way, I'm just going to end it here. There is one other thing. I have 30 seconds. Harrigan Centennial Hall is the center of this community. We have our assembly meetings here. We have all kinds of things here. You can have your wedding here. You can do whatever you want. It is, at the end of the day, to remove this center of business and pleasure from the city, I think really has to be taken into account. We just can't close this building off without recognition of what it means to the city. Thank you.
Is there anyone else this evening for persons to be heard on or off the agenda? Seeing none, that'll bring us to reports. I was able to attend the tribal council meeting where outgoing tribal council members were recognized. The new ones, while the election was certified, new tribal council members will not be seated until the beginning of the month. I also want to extend my thanks to Bob Sam and Mike Miller for their time on tribal council, and I hope that someone is able to take the time with Bob Sam before it's too late to sit down and write an encyclopedia of his knowledge. The man holds more knowledge in his head than I could ever dream to know about Sitka, and all of it's quite fascinating. So thank both of those individuals for their time on council. John?
I'm taking a few days off this week. I'll be off tomorrow and I'll be off Friday. I don't have anybody filling in for me since I'm staying local and still available on the phone. If you contact the phone, I'll have all the calls forwarded to Sarah. Thank you.
Can we say no? Brian?
I'm taking Friday off, and then on December 4th, I'll be in Anchorage for the Alaska Municipal Attorneys Association, which gets over on Tuesday. I'll fly back. On Wednesday, I'm headed then on some personal leave until the following Wednesday, be back in the office in the afternoon of the 14th of December. Thank you.
Liaison representatives. Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just last week, I attended as liaison the first Sustainability Commission meeting. It went very well. They voted on a chair, the vice chair and secretary. Chair is Katie Riley, vice chair is Angela Bowers, and the secretary is Carol Boyson. They discussed at length logistics and the flow of how commission meetings will be run. Also, they approved the bylaws for the commission, and they discussed kind of planning for planning for the vision and goals, etc. I'll keep you some of the update as we have more meetings.
Tor?
Yeah, so there was a investment committee meeting, and those are a few months apart, but a couple of things to bring out of that. First of all, we got the quarterly report from our investor investment advisors or management firm. And while the permanent fund and our other funds have taken a hit like everybody else, the consensus was that it could have been a lot worse because of the diversification we've got. And that they're, I guess we call them cautiously optimistic about the next few months. One of the interesting things was they were saying between the time they put the report together and the time they had the meeting that it had gained a few $1 million because the market had taken a little bit of a bump. But anyway, it's always interesting to look at those and look at the way they're set up and they're watching it. And well, we give them some guidelines for moving between different sectors, and they've definitely responded. Helped us through the troubled waters. The other thing we talked about was the long-running movement to have them turn into the Finance Committee. And we discussed a possible ordinance. And while I think the group as a whole was supportive of becoming the Finance Committee, they wanted to look at some things, and so we're going to bring that up again at the next meeting, and hopefully not long after that bring something to the Assembly. I think that the Finance Department especially would like to see that happen, and to start laying out some of the 30,000-foot rules for how we take care of our finances, and giving both John and Melissa some guidelines when they're making decisions. So stay tuned for that.
Rebecca?
I attended the Police and Fire Commission meeting, and there was discussion about not just the fact that American Street was made one way, but about the process by which that happened. And so I think the municipal engineer will give more information to police and fire, and there's a pathway forward for them to consider. I think it's still under consideration whether that stays in one way or changes back and forth or whatever. So I think there's more to come on that.
Chris?
So I got a couple reports for you tonight. I'll start with Port Harbors. We got our estimates or amount of raw fish tax for this upcoming budget cycle. It's one of the higher ones I've seen since being on the commission. It's $1.4 million, plus we got $300,000 in 2020 disaster relief funds. Harbors is already starting to recruit for port security for 2023 season. It's always been a problem with Harbors is finding security, and usually it's Stan and JJ that end up doing it, which takes them off their normal duties. And on that subject, JJ submitted his letter of resignation, and he'll be done with Harbors March or April. It's going to be a big loss for Harbors. He was our assistant harbor master and did a great job. And I'm definitely going to miss him and appreciated everything he did for us. We talked about wharfage fees, and we passed a $4 wharfage fee per person for any ships that coming to the seawall. And we also brought up harbor property insurance that was kind of sparked, that term, due to the fire in Crescent. Yes. And it was voted unanimously not to support getting property insurance for the harbors. I believe the policy is $140,000 a year with a $100,000 deductible, and that's basically what we're paying to replace these floats over here, and that would have been our first claim in the harbor's history. So basically not worth getting the property insurance for the harbors. My next report is for the GPIP meeting that we had yesterday, and we rolled out the project charter for the haul out. The charter passed unanimously. The next step in the project for the haul out is to put out an RFP to find a project manager who will oversee the entire project. And once that is done, we haven't quite decided how we're going to do this. If it's just going to be a normal meeting or a work session, where we're going to try to get a lot of public input on exactly what the public wants to see for this haul out, whether it's 150 ton lift, 100 ton lift, 500 ton lift, and kind of give a wish list for what the public wants to see in this. So as of right now, I think it'll still be one meeting a month, but once we get the project manager in place, I have a feeling we're going to be doing probably 2 meetings a month. And there was a time frame in the charter, and what was it, completion 2025, operation 2025?
So operational in early 2025.
Yeah. And let's see, then we talked about changing some of the port tariffs for our dock out there, basically trying to maximize revenue that we can see from the few cruise ships that will be making port calls out there. And we passed the 2024 budget. So that's it.
Other liaison reports? Sarah?
All right, our December meetings will be December 13th and December 27th. I encourage you all to wear a holiday sweater, ugly sweater, whatever, on December 13th meeting. We have vacancies on our boards and commissions. Those are the Animal Hearing Board, Health Needs and Human Services Commission, Library Commission, Parks and Rec Committee, Port and Harbors Commission, and Tree and Landscape Committee. So if folks are interested, come see me. Thank you.
Any other reports this evening? Seeing none, that would bring us to adjournment. Motion to adjourn? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you for your time this evening. We are adjourned.
I'm sorry, I forgot. So little time.
John? Sarah? No, I haven't.
I know there's.
How are they?
I don't think I'm gonna like